Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. And it's that time of year. Let's roll the tier list out, shall we? If you haven't already, please make sure to hit like and subscribe. It would be much appreciated. Thank you all so much for your support so far during this international break. And instead of moaning about the board and the people that run the football club, why don't we have a wee moan about the players on the park, shall we? Let's turn our direction towards the players. We're going to spend today evaluating how everyone has played so far up until this point. It's the yearly tradition. We get together at this point, we sit down, we look at everybody from goalkeeper to striker and talk about who's overperforming or underperforming, and I give a brutally honest evaluation on it. So that's what we're doing today. But very quickly before we get started with this tier list, I want to talk about Celtic merch, and specifically buying Celtic merch, because right now I think we're all a little bit conflicted on what to do with our money. We don't want to walk into the superstore and hand over our hard-earned money to these members of the Celtic board who are taking advantage of us. But people still want to go to the games, wearing their colours, visually supporting the team, and rightfully so. And you can still do that. And the best way to do that is by giving your money to independent clothing brands who are making gear for Celtic fans by Celtic fans. So I'm very proud to announce that I am partnering up with Tees for Tims for the next month or so in order to celebrate Celtic in a way that isn't handing Peter Lawwell your money. This is one of the many available designs over on the Tees for Tims website. Oasis inspired, very in trend at the minute, of course, following the reunion. But there is also many others, including this Love Street belter celebrating Albert Kid Day, or this Don't Worry, Be Happy number, which celebrates, of course, one of the more popular chants at Celtic Park in recent times. And there's so many more. Head over there. There is so many designs to choose from. And this is the way to wear your club colours without having to, sacrifice your morals, I suppose. I'm also glad to announce that there is a discount code via the channel. If you use code Ryan118 at checkout, you will save 10% on all your purchases. So head over there, make sure and leave a kind word. And look at this. Look how nice they were. They sent me these over. Belters, eh? Ryan118 inspired stickers. I don't have the money to become the club shirt sponsor, so that's not going to happen anytime soon. I just thought they were cool. So this year feels different. This tier list at this stage of the season feels a bit off this year. And that's because in years gone past, when I sit down during the second international break of the season to discuss players' form, usually we're off to a pretty decent start. It's very rare that we have a lot of players underperforming at this stage. But this season, it's different. We don't have a lot of really standout performers as it stands. The performances on the park have been bleak. We have obviously failed to qualify for the Champions League. We're not even top of the table, which is very unusual for October the 9th. And we're going to have to take all of that into consideration. So this year, I'm expecting to see a lot of players further down the tier list than towards the top. I looked back at the one I done at this exact point last year. I done it on the 8th of October 2024, and I had so many players in those top couple of columns. This year, that ain't going to happen, and we're just going to have to be brutally honest about it. You all know how these work by now. It would be a waste of time me explaining what we're doing here, but I have gone for 8 different rows this season, or at this point of the season, that ranged from brilliant all the way to shite. Brilliant to good to just fine, which is basically average. Promising for some of those players who look as though they're offering something but maybe aren't quite there yet. Underwhelming. Injuries for players that are hard to evaluate. What's the point? And of course, shite. It's very self-explanatory. Each of these rows speak for themselves, and I'm going to use every single player who is listed as a senior squad member, and we're going to put them in here. Even the ones who haven't played a senior game, the likes of Callum Osmond, who might be missing, for all we know, but we're going to take them into consideration anyway. This is the squad that Brendan Rodgers has to use, and we're going to evaluate how they've played whilst being used. Player performances are all that's being considered whilst going into this. I'm going to try and forget about price tags for new signings. I'm going to try and forget about experience. I'm going to try and forget a lot of different things. I know a lot of people will be going on about the tactics and the manager. don't worry, I will slightly consider how the system is being deployed right now and how that might affect certain individuals. But I'm hoping this is all things that will change moving forward. I still acknowledge that things can and will get better moving forward. Just right now, we are in a bit of a rut. So, listen, even though we might have a lot of players down in these bottom rows, and I know a lot of people will be angry about that and they'll be calling me just constantly negative, I think it will get better. So this is October. By the end of the season, I want to see everybody up at brilliant. And that still can happen. Let's get going, shall we? Let me just save everybody about 10 minutes in this video by talking about these players individually. There is no point in me discussing these players for a number of different reasons. First of all, Jota and Alistair Johnston, they're both in the injuries line of things because, well, they've been injured. Jota we haven't seen once. Alistair Johnston hasn't kicked a ball since Kaira Almaty. It would be unfair to evaluate them to this point. So they're in that horrible injuries column, and I'm looking forward to having both of them back whenever that might be. As for the what's the point column, well, the people you would expect to be there are there. Hayato Inamura, Shin Yamada, Callum Osmond, and Jamai Simpson-Pusey. Signings that the manager quite clearly didn't want. Now, the Celtic board will tell you that every signing is green-lighted by the manager. I struggle to believe that when these four players are quite literally lost in Celtic purgatory. And I will reiterate the point, I don't blame the manager. If he didn't want them, he shouldn't feel the need to play them. He shouldn't be forced to play them. And he is better at judging these players than what we ever would be. We don't coach, we don't know. I trust the manager in saying that the likes of Inamura or Yamada isn't ready yet. And I think that all the chatter about people being annoyed that they aren't in the team has kind of vanished with the likes of Sirachi coming in and doing pretty well, the likes of Iheanacho coming in and doing pretty well. Now there is a genuine question over whether or not there's even a place to drop folk to bring in these guys. So, yeah, what's the point? It's simply put, Johnny Kenny and Ross Doohan for other reasons. Ross Doohan, because he's third choice keeper, I can barely evaluate him, and I knew that I wouldn't need to at this stage of the season. It speaks for itself. Johnny Kenny's a weird one. He's came on the pitch a couple of times. He's obviously registered in the Champions League squad as well, but I mean, his minutes have been very, very limited. I don't know where I would put him. I don't think he has played well enough to suggest he's promising either. So he's just in here for me just now. And until that changes, that's where he'll stay. So let's start with the goalkeepers. And I think that we need to be brutally honest about Kasper Schmeichel here. I think he goes into that underwhelming category. He hasn't been up to the same standard as he was this time last year. This time last year, we were sitting here having conversations about what a terrific signing it was, about how he was potentially the best keeper we had since Fraser Forster. A lot of these conversations, not by me, by the way, just the wider support. But genuinely was fantastic. Hadn't conceded a goal in domestic competition up to this point, I believe, and he was just brilliant. He surpassed everybody's expectations. But this season, he's not been up to that same standard. Even though I don't think he's been as bad as what some people are making out, his mistakes have been brutal. And I think there is a serious question over whether or not he is, conducting himself to the same standards as you'd expect. I think underwhelming is pretty honest about Kasper Schmeichel right now. And especially when you compare him to Vinny Sinsalo, who I think I'm going to start him off in the promising category. I mean, he's played, 2 games? I'm not going to get carried away and say, he's been fantastic because he played in 2 cup games where you'd expect him to face very little shots anyway. I still believe that Vinny Sinsalo, however, is Celtic's future number 1. I've seen enough from him over his 2 spells kind of in the team now at the end of last season and in the cup this season to see that we have a promising young keeper here. So that's how I'd evaluate both keepers so far. Kasper, I'm not writing him off. I think that if he gets himself out of that kind of gutter that he's in right now, he can get back to his best. But people will lose patience very, very quickly. They already are. He needs to cut out the mistakes. He has to cut out passing it straight to the opposition. He's got a lot of aspects of his game he needs to look over. I think a lot of people might suggest he needs to lose a little bit of weight as well, but that's not for me to say. I would have some cheek. Underwhelming for me, and Vinny Sinsalo still as promising as he was towards the end of last season. This is a kind of totally random order, by the way. It's all to do with how I uploaded the files. So up next is Austin Trusty, who, I mean, where can you put somebody like Austin Trusty? Is he in the what's the point category as well? He's hardly been in the team. I'm going to leave him in just fine. And that might seem like a bit of an over the top evaluation of Trusty. I don't think there's anything to suggest he should be high in this list. But in the limited minutes he's had, he's looked okay. In fact, I remember watching him play towards the start of the season, and I was very much of the opinion, get him in over Liam Scales. Was very quickly proven wrong on that with how well Scales has played. But I think he's been fine when he's been called upon. Nothing more than that. I'm a big fan of Austin Trusty. He's my Philadelphia boy, and I love that. But yeah, it's hard to talk about somebody who is just not getting many chances right now. I wonder how he feels about that. Sriracha is another one that's pretty difficult to go over. I've been impressed with what I've seen of him so far. I feel like the promising category is for youngsters, and Sriracha isn't a youngster. I would probably put him in just fine as well. I think he's been better than Austin Trusty by all accounts, and he's obviously had a lot more minutes than Trusty. That's to be expected with Kieran Tierney and his fitness issues. But I like the look of him. But it's just so early. I'm not going to go over the top about him. I don't want to be that guy as well, going, oh, he's amazing. Sign him up, get him signed permanently, because I've seen him play well like 3 times. He needs to keep that going over the course of a full season. So right now, been fine. And that's about as far as I'll go with Sriracha. I think we could all agree this lad is very promising. Colby Donovan. And in fact, you could maybe even extend him into good, but I'm going to keep him promising for now. Because, he obviously still has a way to go. I think we've seen that against Braga. He was hooked at half time. And dare I say, it was probably for the best. He did look a little bit overwhelmed by the occasion. It did look as though he was maybe ushered into something that he maybe wasn't ready for. I think he's a very, very promising player. We should really focus on the development of Colby Donovan, but he's still got a ways to go. Domestically, if it was just off a domestic basis, I'd gently put him up into good. But I'm going to leave him in promising for now, because I still think that there's a ways to go in his game. I don't want to put too much pressure on him. Once again, the same with Sriracha. I don't want to go in too heavy too quickly. He's a very promising young talent, though. Here's the first serious conversation we have to have. I think a lot of people would automatically put Tierney into here, the underwhelming category. And that a lot of that comes down to how kind of weak he's looked, how feeble he's looked. The fact he doesn't have the legs about him that you would maybe expect. He's still getting up to speed, but how long can you say that? I'm going to be a bit generous right now. I'm going to be generous about Kieran Tierney, and I'm going to put him into just fine. Some people might think that that's going too far, but I think that he has been fine. He has been. I think just because of how bad we've been, we have focused a lot more on the negatives of Kieran Tierney's return. If we weren't in the mess that we're in right now, I think we'd be overlooking it a little bit more. And I don't think we'd be making as big a deal of it as we are maybe online. I think he's been fine. I think he's been fine, but he needs to get that fitness up. He needs to be able to play 90 minutes. He needs to look stronger. Big questions to be asked of whether or not he can play on that left-hand side anymore. But once again, not going to go in too heavy too quick. I've been genuinely quite happy of what I've seen with Kieran Tierney's return so far. But he needs to rise to the occasion in the bigger games. We need that Kieran Tierney back that we know, that we used to have. Just some doubts right now whether or not we'll get that. I think Vickers has been good. I've seen a lot of people so far this season making out that Vickers has been poor. I think the exact opposite. I think he's been really good. Not brilliant, and we'll get on to the brilliant centre half in a minute. But I think Vickers has been good. He's had a couple of games that bring him down from that brilliant category, and I think that's why people are getting drawn into conversations about his Celtic future. The guy's a colossus. He's an absolute colossus, and I remember coming on here after I think it was the Belgrade game, talking about how good a performance he had that night. Those are the performances that solidify how lucky we are to have Cameron Carter-Vickers. And I think so many people are getting drawn into the TikTok brain, short attention span of a couple of bad performances and they're done. He's nowhere near done, and I think people should be very careful of what they wish for in regards to Cameron Carter-Vickers in his future. I love him. He's arguably my favourite player in the squad. I just think he's so reliable. I just think he's brilliant. And if he can just get that consistency back in his game, and I think if the rest of the squad around him can get back to playing their best, he's somebody that will go right back up at it brilliant as per usual. I love the guy, and I think he's been good so far this season. I mean, we've barely conceded in the league. Our defence has been the best part of our squad, and he's part of it. I hate feeling like a hater, but he is shite. He is. And I feel bad constantly shitting on Ralston. I feel like I do it to him more than I do others. But it's been evident that this season he isn't the standard required. Hence the reason Colby Donovan is probably now ahead of him in the pecking order in the eyes of most fans. When Ralston's been in the team, he hasn't played well. And there's no other category I can really. I mean, underwhelming doesn't fit Tony Ralston because it's not as if I have high expectations of him. So at what point do you just have to say he's shite? You know, I'm sorry, Tony. I know Tony probably hates me. I know that for a fact, but I say it how I see it, and that's how I see it. I'm afraid. This is nuts. Liam Scales is in brilliant. Now, I am not going to change my tune about Scales on everything. I know that I'm going to sound hypocritical putting him in brilliant after everything I've said about Scales. There's still parts of his game that hold Celtic back. I think we all know that. He's not good enough with the ball at his feet. He slows down the play moving out. And for that reason, I was actually thinking about taking him into good because I think there's still a lot of problems there. But Liam Scales has saved us quite a bit this season. For as bad as he plays with the ball at his feet and for as slow as he is, etc., defensively, I used the word Colossus earlier. If I used it for Vickers, I need to use it for Scales. I think I just need to be brutally honest about that. Am I his biggest fan? No. Do I think we should improve on him? Yes. But it doesn't mean you can't praise his game when he deserves it to be praised. He's been arguably Celtic's player of the year so far for what he's done defensively. If he could work on that game, if he could become quicker and smarter with the ball and passing it out from the back and doing whatever he needs to do and speeding up the play, we'd have the best centre half in Scotland in Liam Scales. But sadly, he's not got that quick mindedness that other centre halves do, and that will always hold him back. But he's been brilliant so far this season. I'll give him his credit where it's due. Tenecte goes into good for me just now, with a caveat of I don't want to get carried away. I still think it's a player that has a lot of work to do, that has a long way to go, and probably is getting more credit than he should just because of how bad the rest of the attack has been. That's not me trying to shit on Tenecte by any chance. Absolutely not. But I think that we are in danger of exaggerating how good he is just because of how bad the rest of the attack is. But the difference maker is this. He's came in, he's been positive, he's tried to beat men, he's tried to cut inside, he's tried to shoot, he's tried to create. And a lot of attackers haven't done that this season. So he goes into good for me. I was thinking about putting him in promising, but no, I'm going to put him in good. Hopefully he keeps up that positive attitude that he brings to the squad. It rubs off on more players. I think he's got a lot of development to go through, but that's natural for a boy of that age. So far, what we've seen of him, though, has been good. And I'd be daft to say it hasn't been. Hatate, same as Schmeichel, underwhelming. For a player of his calibre, he should be doing better on a more consistent basis. I'm going to keep it short and sweet. He's just not lived up to the standards or the hype that we know Rio Hatate should have around him. And that's been disappointing. That has been. Listen, he's not been totally shite. I think, once again, Hatate is one of those players that we seem to exaggerate with sometimes, either side of the coin, whether that's how good he's been or how bad he's been. But I think he's just been very underwhelming this season. And it's a shame because he's so good. Balikwisha is a weird one. I suppose we've got to put him in underwhelming for now. He's not had enough minutes to make a full assessment of him. Some people are desperate to write off signings straight away, and people done that with him after a couple of games. I will remain patient. I believe there's a player there. I think we saw the glimpses of that against Motherwell at the weekend, and as long as we get more of that, if that kicks him on, we'll have a good player. But right now, yes, for the money we paid, for as long as the transfer saga went on, I know I said I wouldn't consider these things, he has been slightly underwhelming. You'd have expected him to be in the team every week for as long as that saga went on. It's not happened. It's probably because of how poorly he played in his first couple of games. So he's underwhelming for now. I do believe we'll get more out of him, though. McCowan's a weird one because we just don't see enough of him, but I would suggest that he's been pretty good overall. I'm going to leave him in just fine for now, just because of the minutes he plays. But I love Luke McCowan. I think he gives it his all every time he steps in the park. He does have his days where he doesn't look great, but I would say 7 or 8 times out of 10 when he's on the park, he fits in, he fits well. So I think he's been fine with the minutes he's had, and I think if he had more minutes, we'd probably be bumping him up a wee bit. So he's one of the most difficult players to evaluate in the squad just because of his role in it. But I love the guy, and look, if you see this, in my eyes, you're brilliant, mate. I think Engels has been fine. I know a lot of people are still feeling underwhelmed about Arne Engels. I do think he's been fine more than he's been underwhelming. I don't know. He's such a strange player. We need consistency out of him. We need to see that £11 million player we sign more often. And I think we've seen pause. He came on against is it the Braga game I'm thinking of? He came on anyway in one of the games recently, and he changed the game. And he showed how good he can be. But once again, he's in this situation right now where his minutes aren't guaranteed. He isn't on the pitch regularly. I don't know. I'm going to put him in just fine for now. I don't think he's been as bad as other midfielders. I really don't. I think he's been better than Hatate. I think he's been better than somebody else we're going to come on to. Yeah, listen, I'm going to put him below Luke McCowan, but in the just fine category, with the caveat of, once again, being a very difficult player to gauge with as little as he's played this season. The midfielders are making life difficult. Negren is going into just fine as well. If you looked on his stats alone, Negren arguably goes into brilliant. But its stats don't tell you everything. He has been slow. He has been lethargic looking. He hasn't been the total package quite yet. But we are seeing glimpses of it. And his stats back that up. You don't create that many goals without being good at what you're doing, right? That's undeniable. But we need more. And we need a quicker version of Benjamin Negren. Absolutely. I think I could maybe be convinced to throw him into good just because I personally really like him. But I think that I'm going to leave him in just fine for now, because I know that we need so much more out of him, despite his great stats. Yang. I actually don't think he's been absolutely terrible this season, but there's no other category for him other than shite. Like, where else am I going to put Yang? He's not promising. He's not somebody I expect to see at Celtic next year, or next season, I should say. He's not been underwhelming because I don't have high standards of him. He's not just fine because more times than not, he's pretty pish. I'm just going to have to put him in here. I'm sorry, Yang Gang, but I've told you, I recognise the Yang Gang as a terrorist organisation, so it's the only place for him. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry, but when he comes on the park, I sigh most of the time. But he tries. I won't take that away from him. He does, and he's got something that some wingers haven't had this year, and it's a bit of oomph about him, a bit of drive, and he wants to do something. Sadly, he's just not good enough to do it. I don't know if there's been a more underwhelming player in the squad than Dyson Maeda, simply put. I mean, I don't need to spend long on this. It's self-explanatory. I know he's chipped into a couple of goals here and there. He got the 90th minute winner against Motherwell, which was magic. But Dyson Maeda has been very, very poor. Underwhelming as anything, and and it's sad to say, I'm totally fine with the idea of moving him on in January at this point. And you go back 3 or 4 weeks ago, I was saying on here, be careful what you wish for. You don't want to lose a player like him. He's got to be so hard to replace. I'm kind of fine with him going now, if I'm being totally honest, because he's been mince. He's been very underwhelming, from player of the year to somebody who isn't offering much. It's just an honest evaluation I think most people share. Dane Murray, just like Colby Donovan, goes into promising. I like the look of Dane Murray. I think he's one to keep an eye on, one to make sure we develop. Yeah, promising. Simple as. Kelechi Iheanacho. Very hard one to gauge. Cause if there was something between good and just fine, he would be in there for me. Maybe it's a bit much. I'm going to put him up there. I think he has been good since coming in. It took him a couple of games to look good, kind of, in his movement and in his physicality and stuff. But I think he's grew into the mould pretty well, while also acknowledging he still does need to physically get up to speed. He's obviously chipped in with goals already, which is what we signed him for. He certainly tries. He certainly tries. There's been a couple of games where he's looked like, and I'll just call it how it is, a big fat shite. But there has been games where he's been solid. And I mean, he should have had a goal against Braga as well. So that would have added a lot of points onto this rating. I'm just going to put him in good for now. I just don't think there's a category. It's somewhere in between the two, and I'm just going to put him there. Bernardo. I mean, where do you put Bernardo? I guess you put him in. What's the point? I guess you put him in there. He's barely playing. I want to see more of him. Then when you do see more of him, I mean, he got that chance, didn't he? And he didn't really take it last week, and that's disappointing. So I'm just going to put him in there just now because we aren't seeing Paulo Bernardo play football, basically. I also think that James Forrest has to go into that category as well, because what is the point? It's James Forrest. I say this every year. James Forrest should have his own role because it's James Forrest. You know, he deserves the respect of being a club legend, but we are at the point where you're like, seriously, we're bringing on James Forrest to try and enforce change in the game. The fact he is still so heavily relied upon is probably frustrating for him as well. Yeah, it's James Forrest. I'm not going to say shite 'cause he's no shite, but I'm also not going to say that he's like brilliant 'cause he's not brilliant either. It's just James Forrest, legend. And we end off quite suitably with the club captain. This was sheerly coincidence, by the way, but it is probably quite fitting we end off with him, who has been arguably for me the most underwhelming player in the Celtic squad this season. Just purely down to the fact that it's Callum McGregor and his standards are much higher than what we've seen of him. He'll be disappointed in himself. I know that. There's been games and moments where Cal McGregor has looked fine, but there's also been a lot of moments, and I can't overlook them, where I thought he might be finished. So that is concerning. And for me right now, he goes into that underwhelming category because there's a lot of questions surrounding the captain, and I think he knows them himself. Um, yeah, this is the thing. Him, Hitati, and Maeda all being in that underwhelming category, and Schmeichel, these are leaders. These are big players. The fact they're in there isn't good. And they need to be shifted. They need to be moving up. They need to be moving up, 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 like the K-pop Demon Hunters. So there you have it in full, the entire list. And as you can see, not many in the top two rows, and that's where the problems lie. Well, part of the problem lies. Because if you go back and watch last year's, and you can do it, there was a lot of people in these top two rows, and there usually is. This year, 4 between them. And some obviously people will disagree, people will move people in and out and blah blah blah. It might be different. I think generally speaking, opinions aren't going to be that far apart on these players. And the fact that we've just got more, and I mean, look at this bottom half we have. Let me just count. That's 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 34, 50, 17 players down this end. And we have 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 at the top end. Not good. But there you go. There's my list for this point in the season. Right, that does it then for today. If you've enjoyed, please make sure to hit like and subscribe. Let me know your thoughts and your evaluations of the squad below and what you agree and disagree with. Let's do it in a friendly manner. We don't need to get aggressive about things, ladies and gents. The new PC is coming soon. Microphone, audio, and such will be better very, very soon. Thank you for bearing with me. Until next time, take care, God bless, and I'll see you all tomorrow.